children inside the suits. There is a moment in the first 5 nights at Freddy's where the phone guy, the disembodied voice that guides you through your first week at the restaurant, says something that stops everything cold. He is talking about the animatronics. He is explaining, in a calm, almost apologetic way, that they have a tendency to wander, that they are in what he calls free roaming mode during the night. And then he says it. He says that the suits themselves are not empty, that there is something inside them, something organic, something that has been there long enough that the suit now carry a smell. He describes it gently, as though he has said it before, as though this is a known condition at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, something that gets mentioned in orientation, and then filed away under things the staff does not discuss. The Missing Children incident is the name given to the series of murders that define the earliest dark chapter of the FNAF timeline. 5 children disappeared from a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, believed to have taken place in 1985. They were lured into a back room by a man wearing the Spring Bonnie suit, a large golden rabbit costume that doubled as an animatronic performer. They were killed there, and their bodies were never reported as found. The reason for that is the most quietly horrifying detail in the entire franchise. Their remains were placed inside the animatronic suits, not hidden elsewhere, not buried outside. They were put inside the performers that stood on the stage every day and sang to the children who came to celebrate their birthdays. What this means, on a purely physical level, is something the games never state plainly, but allow you to piece together slowly. Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy continued to perform after the murders. They continued to move, to light up, to sing their programmed songs. And inside each of them, in the space between the mechanics and the outer shell, child's remains were decomposing. The smell that phone guy references, the reason adults recoil while children apparently do not notice, is the answer the game gives you without ever saying it directly. It trusts you to reach that conclusion yourself. And when you do, the entire aesthetic of the restaurant collapses. The birthday cake, the pizza, the cheerful lighting, all of it sits on top of something that cannot be undone. The community has spent years working through the identities of the 5 children. The survival logbook, an official real-world companion book released alongside the games, contains hidden puzzles and ciphers that point toward names. Gabriel is believed to possess Freddy. Jeremy is connected to Bonnie. Susie, whose memory includes a beloved dog that was killed and used to lure her into that back room, is believed to be Chica. Fritz is linked to Foxy. And Cassidy, the 5th child, and perhaps the most important to the deeper lore, is connected to Golden Freddy. These names were never spoken aloud in the games themselves during the original era. They were encoded, buried in word searches and upside-down page numbers in a book sold in toy stores alongside plush toys of the characters these children now inhabit. What makes the possession aspect genuinely disturbing is not just the physical horror of it, it is the nature of what possession means in this universe. These children did not simply die and cease. Their souls, their personalities, their fear and their grief remained attached to the suits. The animatronics began behaving strangely. They would stare at adults. They would track movement in ways their programming did not account for. The adults in the restaurant who knew about the murders would have understood why. The ones who did not would have attributed it to faulty mechanics, to outdated software, to the general strangeness of machines built to smile and wave. The children in the audience noticed nothing wrong because children tend to read warmth as warmth, even when it comes from a hollow shell. There is a mini-game in 5 Nights at Freddy's 2 called Give Gifts, Give Life, and it shows the puppet moving through a darkened room, placing small lights into the empty animatronic suits. The lights are the souls. The puppet is not just filling in empty robots, it is giving murdered children a second form of existence, a continued presence in the physical world, because the alternative is something the lore implies is far worse. Without that anchoring, without the suits to hold them, those children would be adrift. The suits become prisons but also shelters. They become the only continuity available after a violent and premature end. This dynamic turns every gameplay moment where the animatronics pursue the player into something ethically complex. These are not mindless machines running attack algorithms. They are children who are murdered, who are confused and afraid, who have been told through the logic of their programming and their grief that the security guards who work in the place where they died are dangerous. They are trying to protect themselves and each other, the only way they understand. The aggression is not mechanical, it is emotional. It is the behavior of beings who have been wronged and are responding to an environment that reminds them every single night of the circumstances of their death. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza continued to operate for some time after the disappearances. The bodies were never officially confirmed. The restaurant faced an investigation but remained open. This detail that a business continued to function as a place of celebration for families while children's remains sat inside the performers is perhaps the most structurally horrifying thing about the original game's lore. It does not require supernatural explanation. It is just the weight of what was allowed to happen. The smell, the strange behavior of the animatronics, the fact that the establishment's management apparently knew and continued to hire new staff without full disclosure. All of it describes something that was possible because enough people looked away for long enough. And the children are still there. That is the conclusion every thread leads back to. Even after the animatronics were replaced, upgraded, dismantled, and eventually burned, the souls continue to find new forms. The franchise keeps returning to them because the lore insists that they cannot simply be disposed of. They existed before the suits, and they have continued to exist after them. The question of whether they will ever find rest is one that takes many games to begin answering, and even the answer given in later entries raises new uncertainties. What the missing children incident established was not just a backstory, it was a premise that the children inside the suits are not a past event. They are a present condition. They are still there every night behind those eyes that glow in the dark, still waiting for something that never quite arrives. Consider what it means to be Susie. The lore suggests she was lured using her dog, that William Afton killed the animal first and used that grief as leverage to get her somewhere she should not have been. She was a child in mourning, and that grief was weaponized with deliberate precision. Whatever Susie was like before that day, whatever she enjoyed or hoped for or was afraid of, became compressed into the Chica suit. Her continued existence is not just the persistence of a soul. It is the persistence of the specific emotional state she was in when she died, layered over with the disorientation of inhabiting a machine, of experiencing the world through animatronic sensors and programmed behaviors that were never designed with her in mind. The aggression she shows toward the night guards is not random. It is the behavior of someone who was hurt by an adult in a position of trust, who is now surrounded by adults in an environment that mirrors the one where she was killed, responding the only way the suit allows. Gabriel's connection to Freddy Fazbear adds another dimension. Freddy is the face of the franchise. His image is on the sign outside, on the birthday napkins and the party plates, on the merchandise sold in the gift shop by the entrance. He is the mascot in the most complete sense of the word, the character that represents everything Freddy Fazbear's Pizza claims to be. If Gabriel is Freddy, then the soul of a murdered child has been pressed into service as the public face of the company that created the conditions for his death. Every child who looks up at Freddy on the stage and feels comforted or delighted is looking at Gabriel. The smile on that face was designed before Gabriel was placed inside it, but it is Gabriel who wears it now. And the gap between what the smile was designed to communicate and what is actually behind it is the compressed distance between the franchise's surface and everything it is built on. The question the games ask implicitly, and that the community has wrestled with for years, is whether these children have any sense of who they were before. Whether the soul that possesses a suit retains memory, personality, the specific texture of a life cut short. The behavioral evidence in the games is mixed. They react to names. They appear in specific minigames connected to specific moments from their lives. The survival logbook suggests that at least one of them, Cassidy, retains enough continuity to engage in something resembling communication. But possession in this universe seems to create a compressed state, a version of the person that is dominated by the emotional conditions of their death. Fear, confusion, the sense that the adults nearby are not to be trusted. What the Happiest Day minigame offers is the counterpoint. It shows what these children look like when those conditions are temporarily suspended. A party, a cake, masks removed. The children sitting as themselves, not as possessed performers. The peaceful fade that follows when the birthday is finally right. This is the version of them that was suppressed by years inside the suits. The children who had ordinary lives before the day William Afton took them into the back room. The minigame lasts only seconds. The lives those seconds represent lasted years. Whatever Gabriel liked about Saturdays, whatever Jeremy's laugh sounded like, whatever Susie told her parents about the day she got her dog, all of it is contained somewhere inside the suits that pursue you through the night. The horror is inseparable from the tragedy. They are not monsters. They were children. They are still children, in the only way the world left available to them. The man who wouldn't die. William Afton should have died in a safe room sometime in the mid-1980s. The way it unfolds in the minigames of Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is grim and strangely quiet. He has been dismantling the original animatronics, pulling apart the suits one by one in an abandoned location that has clearly been closed for some time. The floor is wet. Rats move through the shadows. The ceiling leaks. He works methodically, pulling the endoskeletons apart, scattering the pieces. And then the children come back. Not physically, as spirits, as small golden shapes that drift toward him through the dark corridors of the building he thought was empty. They back him into a corner, and he does the only thing he can do. He hides inside the one remaining suit. The suit is Spring Bonnie, the same Spring Bonnie he wore when he killed them. And the moisture in the room, the very same rain-soaked air that filled the abandoned location on that night, does what spring-lock suits do when exposed to humidity. The mechanisms snap back. The internal components, the metal parts held in careful tension by hand crank locks, release all at once. They impale him. They crush. They do not kill him cleanly. The game does not show this with graphic detail, but the way the sprite collapses, the way it folds into itself, communicates everything. He did not escape. He did not get away with it. He was destroyed inside the thing that made him most dangerous, surrounded by the souls of the children he thought he had silenced. That should be the end of the story. It is not. William Afton's soul fused with the Spring Bonnie suit. This is the event that creates Springtrap, the decayed humanoid animatronic that serves as the sole enemy in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. For 30 years, he remained sealed in a hidden safe room within the original location, his body mummifying within the deteriorating suit, his consciousness persisting through some quality of the FNAF universe that the games call Remnant. Remnant is described in later entries as a substance that anchors the soul to the physical world, a material that exists within animatronics that have been occupied by enough grief and death. Afton had more of it than anyone. His death did not dissolve him. It embedded him deeper into the fabric of his own creation. When Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction, opened 30 years later, the employees discovered Springtrap in the back of the building and brought him into the attraction as a prop. This is the scenario of FNAF 3. They did not understand what they had found. To them, it was a remarkable relic, an ancient and authentically terrifying animatronic from the earliest days of Fazbear Entertainment. To the audience, it was a curiosity. To William Afton, still conscious inside that degraded shell, it was the first opportunity he had encountered in 3 decades. The attraction burned down. Afton survived. He reappears in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator as Scraptrap, a different physical state but recognizably the same entity. The sweat has been damaged further, stripped down in some places, altered in others. His body inside it has continued its strange process of preservation without peace. Henry Emily, his former business partner and the man whose daughter was Afton's first victim, had constructed an elaborate trap to lure Afton and the remaining possessed animatronics into one location. The building was designed to burn. Henry intended it as a simultaneous end for everything Fazbear Entertainment had created and corrupted. He speaks to each animatronic in turn, including to Springtrap, and calls him old friend, with a tone that carries the specific weight of a friendship that was destroyed by an unforgivable act. The building burns. Afton burns inside it. He survives again. In the Afton ending of Security Breach, a decade or more later, he appears as Burntrap, fused to a new version of the Spring Bonnie suit, hidden in the lowest levels of the Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex. What keeps him alive at this point is not mechanical. There is no functioning technology maintaining him. He persists because he insists on persisting. The phrase most associated with William Afton across the franchise is, "I always come back," and it functions less as a boast and more as a description of his nature. He is not surviving through cleverness or preparation. He is surviving because his will to continue, his refusal to be finished, is itself a kind of force. The disturbing implication of this pattern is that Afton cannot be defeated through physical means alone. Every form of destruction that has been visited upon him has been incomplete because the thing animating him, the remnant-soaked soul that refuses to dissolve, is not a body. Bodies can be burned. Bodies can be crushed. A soul that has developed such a density of violent will that it can reshape physical matter, that can fuse with metal and wire and continue as a hybrid entity, does not respond to fire the way an ordinary human corpse would. The game suggests that the only way to truly neutralize Afton is to address him at the soul level, to have whatever force anchors him to the world be dissolved or redirected. This is part of what makes Cassidy's role so significant, a connection that runs through the deepest layers of the lore. What the franchise has never fully resolved is whether Afton is aware of all of this, whether he understands that he is operating on borrowed continuity, that his persistence is an anomaly rather than a triumph. His dialogue in the later games suggests someone who has fully integrated his immortality into his identity, who views it as confirmation of something he believed about himself long before he died. He founded Fazbear Entertainment alongside Henry Emily. He designed animatronics with child capture mechanisms built in. He killed his business partner's daughter and went home. He spent years performing as Spring Bonnie at birthday parties, while parents and children smiled at him. The man who built the company that bears. Freddy Fazbear's name is the man inside the rotting suit, and the rotting suit is still somewhere in the continuity of the franchise, still present, still waiting for the conditions that will allow him to return once more. Whatever destroyed him has never been sufficient, and the games, at least so far, have not provided a satisfying final answer for why. The girl who became the puppet, the security puppet minigame, is one of the quietest moments in Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria Simulator, and also one of the most devastating. It tells its story without dialogue. A small girl stands outside a restaurant at night. It is raining. She has a green wristband on her wrist, the kind that would signal to the security puppet inside. A tall, lanky animatronic built specifically to watch over children, that she was under its protection. But the puppet is trapped. A small box has been placed on top of its gift box enclosure, weighing down the lid, preventing it from emerging. The girl stands in the rain. The purple car idles nearby, and then she is gone. The puppet breaks free too late. It moves outside into the rain. It finds her there, in the dark, next to the building, and it collapses beside her. The rain short-circuits its systems. It shuts down next to the body of the child it was built to protect, and Charlotte Emily possesses it. Charlotte was the daughter of Henry Emily, co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment and the man who designed the original animatronics. She was William Afton's first victim, killed outside what is understood to be Fredbear's family diner, or one of the earliest Freddy Fazbear locations, before the missing children incident that would claim 5 more lives. She was killed, as best as the law makes clear, because William saw her alone and acted without specific premeditation, the way someone acts when an opportunity presents itself, and they have already crossed the threshold in their own mind that would prevent ordinary people from doing such things. He drove away afterward in his purple car. The minigame file in the game's code is named Later That Night. What Charlotte became after her death is perhaps the most morally complex figure in the franchise. As the puppet, she did not simply haunt the restaurant the way the other children came to haunt their individual suits. She took on a more active role. The Give Gifts Give Life minigame in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 shows the puppet moving through a dark room, approaching each empty animatronic in sequence, and placing the soul of a murdered child inside it. She gave the missing children incident victims a continued existence. She was the one who ensured that Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy were not simply empty suits with bodies inside them. She transformed them from graves into homes. This act carries an enormous amount of weight in the law. The puppet was not obligated to do this. She was not programmed to do it. It was an expression of her own nature, what Henry Emily would later describe in the completion ending of Pizzeria Simulator as her protective instinct, her inability to be content to disappear. He speaks to her directly in that moment, acknowledging that she has been carrying all of this, that she has been the force that held the tragedy together and refused to let it dissolve into simply the story of children who vanished and were forgotten. He tells her it is time to rest. The puppet's design makes sense when you understand who is inside it. The tall, pale, marionette-like animatronic with its long limbs and its stylized face, and the strings that extend from its fingers, is not built to be comforting in the way Freddy Fazbear is built to be comforting. It is built to be present, to reach, to hold. Charlotte was a child who, in the moments before her death, was trying to get to someone who needed her. The animatronic she inhabits reflects that reaching quality, that sense of extension, of arms stretched out towards something that keeps receding. The music box in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is directly connected to the puppet. If the music stops, the puppet emerges. What the player understands as a threat mechanic is, in lore terms, something closer to a grief response. The music is the only thing that keeps her contained. There is a detail in the franchise that adds another layer of strange weight to her story. The puppet is eventually captured and contained within an animatronic called Lefty, which Henry himself built for this purpose. The Lefty animatronic, standing among the other damaged and discarded characters the player can salvage in Pizzeria Simulator, is Henry's deliberate instrument. He built a suit specifically designed to hold his daughter, so that she could be brought into the location he intended to burn, so that she could finally be freed from the form she had inhabited for years. The mechanic of the game has you deciding whether to bring Lefty in or dispose of it, and the completion ending depends on making the right choices. Henry designed the trap for his daughter's soul the same way he designed everything else in his career, with precision and with grief. The fact that Charlotte was Afton's first victim, that she predates even the missing children incident, means that the horror of Fazbear Entertainment began with her. She is the origin point of everything that followed. Henry designed the animatronics. Afton killed his daughter. Her soul possessed the puppet. The puppet gave the other murdered children a continued presence inside the suits. The suits then proceeded to attack every security guard who worked the night shift for decades. A single act of violence outside a children's restaurant became the first link in a chain that extended through multiple buildings, multiple iterations of the franchise, and multiple games. The girl in the rain, the one with the green wristband, the one the puppet could not reach in time, is the reason any of the rest of it happened at all. What the lore never fully clarifies is whether Charlotte understood all of this, whether, from inside the puppet, she could perceive the long-term consequences of the choice she made to inhabit that suit and begin placing souls inside the others. The franchise positions her as something close to heroic for having done so, for having refused to abandon the other victims to nothingness. But the question of whether heroism is the right frame for a child who was murdered and then spent decades as an animatronic in a haunted restaurant is one the games leave open. Henry, at the end, says he is sorry. He says she was shut out and left to die, and no one lifted her up. And then he tells her it is time to rest. Whether rest is something that is possible for a soul that has been carrying this much for this long is the question that lingers long after the fire. The music box mechanic in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is one of the most distinct gameplay systems in the franchise. Every other threat in the game can be managed by watching cameras and using specific tools at the right moment. The puppet is managed by continuous maintenance. You must wind the music box. You must keep it wound. Not because winding it does anything offensive or defensive, but because the music is the only thing that keeps Charlotte in her gift box. The moment the music stops, she emerges. She does not move toward the office with the slow, camera-by-camera progression of the other animatronics. She simply arrives. The transition is immediate. The music was holding her. Without it, she is already there. This mechanic, understood through the lens of who Charlotte is and what she experienced, carries a particular weight. She is a child who was killed outside a building she was locked out of in the rain, while the machine built to protect her was trapped by something as simple as a box placed on top of its enclosure. Something preventable kept the puppet from reaching her. Now, the only thing that keeps her contained is a music box that requires constant attention. The parallel is uncomfortable. In both cases, the maintenance of a simple mechanism was the difference between protection and catastrophe. The first time, the mechanism failed. In FNAF 2, it is entirely within the player's power to keep winding the box, and the game is specifically designed to make you forget to draw your attention away at exactly the wrong moment and let the music run down. There is also the question of what the puppet's behavior in FNAF 2 reveals about Charlotte's emotional state. The other animatronics pursue you because they perceive the security officers dangerous, because the presence of a human adult in that specific location triggers their protective aggression. The puppet operates differently. She is not technically hunting you in the same way. She is escaping the box. The threat she poses is the threat of a contained thing that has been released, not the threat of something actively pursuing you across the building. This distinction is subtle but meaningful. The other children are responding to you. Charlotte is responding to the absence of the music. The music is what she was given instead of safety. And when it runs out, she stops being manageable in the way that only ever applied to her because someone kept winding something. Henry built her a new containment unit years later in the form of Lefty. He designed it himself, knowing his daughter was inside the puppet, knowing what he was asking of her by containing her again. The Lefty suit is designed to comfort its occupant while also preventing their full manifestation. Henry apparently spent years working toward the moment he could gather her, along with every other anchored soul in the franchise's history, into one location for a final release. The song he sings to the children in the completion ending is addressed to each of them in turn. When he reaches Charlotte, his voice changes in a way that is not describable in terms of dialogue alone. He is a father who helped build the machine that was supposed to protect his daughter, and the machine could not save her. And the only thing he was able to give her in the aftermath was eventually another cage. He burns the building. He stays inside it. Whether this constitutes justice or grief or apology or all three simultaneously is something the franchise allows you to decide. The lockbox. At the end of Five Nights at Freddy's 4, after the final night is completed, after the nightmare animatronics have been survived and the character has persisted through the worst the game can throw at them, a cutscene plays. It is simple. A birthday cake, a closed box, a bed. The in-game character is in a hospital, context has confirmed this, recovering from the injury that defines the central trauma of the entire fourth game. And then the scene fades, and the credits roll, and there is a box, just a box, sitting there in the corner of the final scene. The box cannot be opened. It has no visible mechanism, no key, no combination. Players search the source code. They found the box's assets, but no trigger, no conditional that would unlock it under any normal or abnormal gameplay circumstance. Scott Cawthon, the creator of the series, eventually acknowledged publicly that the box was intentional, that it contained the answer to the game's central questions, and that he had planned to reveal its contents once the community had pieced together enough of the surrounding lore to appreciate the revelation. He said that time had passed, and he had changed his mind about what was inside it. He never opened it. The box in FNAF 4 has become the single most discussed unsolved mystery in the franchise's history. Not because its contents would necessarily change everything, but because the act of sealing it and leaving it sealed represents something philosophically significant about how FNAF tells its story. Scott Cawthon built a game that invites players to decode minigames, to read hidden messages in scrambled text, to cross-reference details across multiple releases in search of a coherent narrative. He then placed at the center of one of those games an object that cannot be decoded by any means. It exists outside the system of clues and solutions. It is present, but permanently inaccessible. The most widely discussed theory about the box connected to the crying child, the small boy who is believed to be the player character of FNAF 4, the younger son of William Afton, who died after his head was crushed by the Fredbear animatronic on the night of his birthday in 1983. The crying child's death is one of the most documented events in FNAF's lore, and also one of the most emotionally weighted. He was a child who was terrified of the animatronics, whose fear was used against him repeatedly by his older brother Michael and his friends, who drove him to the restaurant for what should have been a celebration and instead ended in catastrophe. In his final moments, feverish and barely conscious in a hospital bed, his Fredbear plush toy spoke to him. The voice said it would put him back together. The theory holds that the box contains the remains of the crying child, or perhaps the crying child himself in some form, reconstructed by his father. William Afton's relationship with death and resurrection is one of the defining obsessions of the franchise. He killed children to understand what happened to the soul after death. He observed the way souls clung to physical forms, to animatronics, to the remnant that accumulated in machines that had been near enough, to death for long enough. If he watched his youngest son die, and if the soul of that child clung to the Fredbear plush the way Charlotte Emily's soul clung to the puppet, it is not impossible within the logic of this universe that Afton attempted to do something with that soul. The box, in this reading, is what he made. Whether it is a tomb or a vessel or something else entirely, is what the box will not tell you. Other theories place different things inside. Some suggest the box contains the remnants of the fourth game's story itself, the meta-narrative of what FNAF 4 actually represents within the wider timeline. The game is anomalous. It has a different visual language from the other entries. Its nightmares are psychological rather than institutional, personal rather than corporate. The building in which it takes place is a home, not a restaurant. The animatronics are distorted and swollen and personal. The versions of Freddy and Bonnie and Chica that exist in the specific fear space of one specific child. The box, in this interpretation, contains that child's entire inner world, sealed away because its contents are too personal, too close to the center of the tragedy to be exposed. What the franchise has never fully resolved is whether Afton is aware of all of this, whether he understands that he is operating on borrowed continuity, that his persistence is an anomaly rather than a triumph. His dialogue in the later games suggests someone who has fully integrated his immortality into his identity, who views it as confirmation of something he believed about himself long before he died. He founded Fazbear Entertainment alongside Henry Emily. He designed animatronics with child capture mechanisms built in. He killed his business partner's daughter and went home. He spent years performing as Spring Bonnie at birthday parties while parents and children smiled at him. The man who built the company that bears Freddy Fazbear's name is the man inside the rotting suit, and the rotting suit is still somewhere in the continuity of the franchise, still present, still waiting for the conditions that will allow him to return once more. Whatever destroyed him has never been sufficient, and the games, at least so far, have not provided a satisfying final answer for why. What the franchise does suggest across the accumulation of all these deaths and returns is that Afton's persistence is not evidence of strength. It is evidence of refusal. He cannot let go of the world he damaged because letting go would mean accepting that it is finished, that he is finished, that the children he killed have moved on to something beyond his reach. As long as he continues, he maintains some claim on the story. He remains the antagonist rather than becoming merely the cause of past events. His endurance is the endurance of someone who has made himself so central to a tragedy that the tragedy cannot conclude without him. Whether the franchise eventually finds a way to conclude it without him, or whether he will continue to return in some new form through whatever comes after Security Breach, is the question the entire arc has been building toward. The answer, if it comes, will determine whether FNAF is a story about the persistence of evil or a story about the limits of it. It is worth sitting with the specific quality of each transformation because they are not equivalent. Springtrap is Afton preserved, decayed but essentially continuous, a version of him that has been compressed and hardened by 30 years of isolation, still recognizable as the man who built the company. There is a visual in FNAF, 3 of his face visible through a gap in the damaged suit, the pale flesh of a corpse that has not dissolved in the way corpses are supposed to, eyes still visible in the darkness. He is there in a way that is almost worse than if he were not visible at all. A ghost would suggest the body was gone. This is the body still present, still inside the machine, still occupying the space between the mechanical and the human in a way that refuses resolution. Scraptrap is different. By the time he appears in Pizzeria Simulator, the suit has been further degraded, portions of the original shell absent or replaced. He's leaner, more exposed, carrying the specific quality of something that has been through additional destruction and emerged reconfigured rather than restored. He moves differently. He has adapted to whatever intervening damage occurred between the fire at Fazbear's Fright and his arrival at the salvageable junk pile outside the new location. The franchise does not explain what happened during that interval. It presents the result without the process, which is consistent with how Afton operates across the series. You encounter him already transformed. The transformation itself is private. Burntrap, the form glimpsed in the depths of the Mega Pizzaplex in Security Breach, represents something further still. He is fused to a new version of the Spring Bonnie structure, but the organic material surrounding the endoskeleton has reached a state that suggests decades of continued deterioration. He is recognizable primarily through context, through the Spring Bonnie association, and through the way the narrative positions him. As a physical entity, he has become difficult to distinguish from the architecture of the room he inhabits. He has grown into the space around him the way old roots grow into old concrete, not by design, but by the accumulated pressure of existing in one place for long enough. What connects all of these forms is not the animatronic suit. Suits have been replaced and abandoned and burned. What connects them is the soul inside, and the soul inside is fueled by something the lore calls remnant, but that functions narratively as pure unwillingness. The franchise's consistent position is that Afton survives because he refuses not to. This is not a supernatural ability he was born with or acquired through research. It is the most extreme possible expression of a personality trait he demonstrated throughout his life. The absolute prioritization of his own continuation over any other consideration. He killed children to understand death and avoid it. He built mechanisms to capture souls. He conducted experiments on the concept of what makes a person persist after the body fails. And then when death arrived for him in the form of the Springlock suit, in a room full of the children he had murdered, His refusal was strong enough to animate a corpse inside deteriorating metal for decades. The children he killed, confronted with the same threshold, became confused and frightened and attached themselves to the nearest available form. They did not choose this. They were overwhelmed by it. Afton appears to have chosen it, or something in his psychology produced the same result as choice. A will so organized around self-continuation that death could not find traction in it. This is perhaps the most genuinely disturbing thing about him. Not the murders, which are horrifying on their own terms, but the implication that the quality which makes him impossible to finally destroy is the same quality that made him capable of the murders in the first place. The utter absence of a competing priority. No grief, no guilt, no love significant enough to override the fundamental drive to remain. He continues because nothing else has ever mattered to him enough to make stopping worthwhile. What remains is the visual. The end of FNAF 4 showing that box, sitting in the corner of a child's room in a hospital after everything that has happened, and the game simply ending without touching it. You can walk up to it. Nothing happens. The credits play anyway, and the box stays closed, containing whatever it contains. In the final room of a game about a child who was afraid and who died, and who in some form continued, holding something that the franchise has decided you are not ready to know, or perhaps that even the franchise itself has not yet decided. The emotional architecture of FNAF 4 makes the box uniquely resonant because of what the game asks you to do for 7 nights. You play as a child. You check under the bed, check inside the closet, listen at the door. You wind a music box. You breathe in shallow intervals to keep a breathing meter from triggering a nightmare animatronic in the room with you. The mechanics are the mechanics of a child trying to survive in a house where the dark is genuinely dangerous, where the monsters are not imaginary. The nightmare versions of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy are not the real animatronics. They are the crying child's distorted internal representations of them, swollen and sharp-toothed, and enormous in the way that fears are enormous when you are small. You survive them, night after night, and then on the final night you survive the worst version of all of them. Nightmare Fredbear, the golden bear rendered as pure dread. You survive, the morning comes, and then you are in the hospital. And there is the box. The question the box forces you to sit with is whether the child who made it through those nights, who kept the door closed and the light on, who listened hard enough to know when to act, deserved what came next. The birthday party, the Fredbear's mouth, the hospital room with its humming equipment, and the silent Fredbear plush, sitting beside the bed. The franchise's answer to this question is never spoken directly. It is given in tone, in the weight of the music that plays over those final moments, in the fact that the Fredbear plush speaks at all, that it acknowledges the child's continued existence, that it says something about putting him back together. Whether that promise was kept is exactly what the box might contain, and the box will not open. The specific texture of FNAF 4's horror is different from every other entry in the franchise, and this difference is part of what makes the box feel so significant. The earlier games take place in institutional spaces, restaurants, and horror attractions, and underground facilities. FNAF 4 takes place in a home. The bedroom is detailed with the specific objects of a particular child's particular life. The Fredbear plush, the drawings on the wall, the specific layout of the furniture that you must navigate in the dark, knowing where the bed is, knowing the distance from the closet to the door, learning the geography of this room over 7 nights until it becomes as familiar as a place you have lived in. The nightmares that inhabit the room are not imported from somewhere else. They grew here, in the space between the walls of this specific child-specific fear, out of the experiences that furnished his life and the ones he had been unable to process. When the franchise is operating at this register, which is intimate and personal and organized around the inner world of a single child, rather than the institutional dynamics of a company, the locked box at the end carries more than a narrative mystery. It carries the weight of everything the game has asked you to inhabit. You have been inside this child's fear for 7 nights. You know the shape of it. The box is the one part of it you are not permitted to enter, and its placement at the very end, after the survival, after the hospital, after the plush, speaks its final words, suggests that what is inside it is the one thing the franchise decided you had not earned the right to know. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Scott Cawthon has said that his idea of what is in the box changed over time. This statement, made in the context of fan discussion about the game's mysteries, is one of the most revealing things he's said about the franchise's construction. It means that at some point there was a definite answer, that the box had a specific and intentional content, and that the content was revised. It means that the meaning of the box is not fixed in the way the meaning of a solved puzzle is fixed. It is provisional. It belongs to a story that its creator was still writing while the community was still decoding it, and the decoding process and the writing process influenced each other. The box at the end of FNAF 4 is the point where the franchise's narrative construction becomes most visible, where the space between what was designed and what was decided and what was eventually changed is largest and most honestly acknowledged. It is a sealed room inside a story that is itself still being built. The children inside the suits eventually found their rest. The contents of the box are still waiting. The 2 souls in the Golden Bear. Golden Freddy is different from the other animatronics from the moment you first encounter it. In 5 Nights at Freddy's 1, it appears in the office without coming through a door. There is no camera footage of it approaching. It is simply there, slumped in the chair across from you, head tilted, eyes empty, in the pose of something that is not quite performing and not quite threatening and not quite dead. If you look at it too long, it jump scares you. If you place a Freddy Fazbear mask over your face before it reaches you, it disappears. In 5 Nights at Freddy's 2, it can crash the game entirely. Not a game over screen, a crash. The application closes. The desktop reappears, as though something about Golden Freddy exceeds what the software can contain. The theory that has gathered the most evidence across the franchise is the Golden Duo theory. The idea that the Golden Freddy suit is occupied by 2 distinct souls rather than 1. The first of these is Cassidy, whose name was decoded from the FNAF survival logbook through a sequence of incorrect page numbers that spelled out coordinates in a word search, returning a single name. Cassidy is believed to be the 5th victim of the missing children incident, the last child killed, and the one whose death produced something qualitatively different from the others. The franchise positions Cassidy as the soul that refused to move on even after the other children found peace. Cassidy's behavior within the law is unlike the behavior of the other missing children. Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, and Fritz, the souls inside Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, were released in the Happiest Day minigame and found their peace. The FNAF 3 good ending shows their symbols fading as they finally depart. Cassidy does not depart. The ultimate custom night, which positions William Afton in a nightmarish loop designed to cause him maximum suffering, is widely understood to be Cassidy's construction. She has built a prison for him. She has assembled every animatronic from across the series, every character who has a grievance, and arrange them in a never-ending rotation that prevents him from finding rest the same way he prevented the children from finding rest. The old man. Consequences Easter egg in that game suggests she was warned to let him go, to let him suffer his punishment in whatever comes after. She chose not to. The second soul within Golden Freddy is the crying child, William Afton's youngest son, the boy from FNAF 4, whose death in 1983 preceded the missing children incident by 2 years. The connection between the crying child and Golden Freddy runs through several threads. The Fredbear suit, the original Golden Bear animatronic that crushed the crying child's head, is understood by many in the community to be the same physical suit that would later become Golden Freddy. If the child's soul was anchored to the thing that killed him, and if that thing became the suit known as Golden Freddy, then the crying child has been inside it all along. The survival logbook appears to show a conversation between two entities inside Golden Freddy, one of whom is trying to help the other remember who they were in life. This is among the most structurally strange details in the entire franchise. Cassidy, who was murdered by William Afton, is apparently in the same suit as William Afton's murdered son. She knows who he is. The logbook shows her asking him about his memories, about his favorite ride, about the plush toy that spoke to him. She is helping him, despite knowing that his father killed her. Despite the fact that her entire continued existence is organized around ensuring that William Afton never escapes the torment she has constructed for him, she has apparently chosen to assist his son in finding his way through the confusion of whatever afterlife exists in this universe. This adds a layer to the Golden Freddy question that no other animatronic in the franchise carries. The others have single occupants. The others have legible grief, a specific victim, a specific cause of death, a specific animatronic built for a specific purpose. Golden Freddy has 2 children who should have no reason to coexist, and who appear to have arrived at something resembling understanding inside the constraints of a gold suit in a restaurant that smells of death. The franchise does not explain how this works. It does not clarify whether they can communicate, whether they share perception, whether one controls the body while the other observes. What it leaves you with is the image of 2 murdered children inside one shell, one burning with anger and one simply lost, and between them something that the law has decided to call "it's me," the phrase that appears in capitals without context on monitors and walls throughout the original game. That phrase has never received a definitive explanation. It is usually attributed to Cassidy, asserting her presence, reminding whoever is watching that she exists and has not been forgotten and is still here. But there are readings that give it to the crying child, to the ghost of a small boy trying to identify himself to someone he hopes will recognize him. If both souls are inside Golden Freddy, then "it's me" might be both of them speaking at once, their voices layered in the same way their presences are layered, indistinguishable from each other in the same way their grief has become indistinguishable in the suit that holds them. The franchise has not resolved what happens to them. Cassidy presumably continues to maintain her hold on William Afton through whatever form he currently occupies. The crying child's fate after his role in the broader narrative is less clear. Whether there is rest available for either of them remains genuinely unknown. What the FNAF 3 Happiest Day minigame shows is relevant here. A child sits at a birthday party table. A birthday cake is presented. The other children around the table wear the masks of the animatronics they possess. The birthday child wears the Golden Freddy mask. And then the souls at the table fade away into something that the game represents as peace. But not all of them. The bad ending of FNAF 3 shows animatronic heads with light still glowing inside them, which is widely read as the soul still being present, still trapped. The good ending is the 5 children finding rest on the night of a proper birthday. Cassidy is not among the ones who rest. She chose to remain. The bad ending's implication and the good ending's omission both point toward the same conclusion. Whatever peace was available was not something Cassidy accepted. She stayed because William Afton stayed, and she intends to outlast him. What the Golden Duo theory establishes, whether it is confirmed or continues to exist as the community's most supported reading, is that the animatronic most associated with mystery in the original game is mysterious for a reason that is more personal and more specific and more heartbreaking than the mechanical strangeness of its behavior ever suggested. There are 2 children in there, and they have been in there together for a very long time. The ultimate custom night is the place where Cassidy's construction becomes most visible. The setup is that William Afton is being tormented by a rotating selection of every animatronic the franchise has ever produced. 50 of them are available to set against him. You can customize the difficulty of each one individually. You can set them all to maximum and attempt to survive, while every version of every Fazbear Entertainment mascot pursues you simultaneously across a single office. The conceit is that this is not a game about survival. It is a game about suffering. The Old Man Consequences Easter egg, accessible by fishing in a specific location in the game's pond area, shows a large figure at the water's edge who tells you to leave the man to his torment and find something better. The man at the water is understood to be addressing Cassidy, warning her that organizing an eternal nightmare for William Afton may not be doing anything good for her own continued existence. The fact that the warning goes unheeded, that the ultimate custom night continues regardless, suggests something about what Cassidy has become. The other missing children were characterized primarily by fear and confusion in their possession, by the disorientation of being inside a suit in a building associated with their deaths. Cassidy appears to have achieved something more focused. Her hatred for Afton is organized and purposeful in a way that the other children's aggression was not. She did not simply find a form to inhabit and react to her environment. She built a prison, designed a system, populated it with every character available to her, and tuned each one to be as relentless as possible. The grief that drove her is still grief, but it has been shaped by decades into something more precise. The survival logbook, which functions as a kind of dialogue between Cassidy and the crying child conducted through the margins of an official companion book, shows a different register of her behavior. She is patient with him. She asks questions and waits for answers. She is trying to help him remember who he was, which implies she can feel that he has lost something, that the years inside the suit have blurred or fractured his sense of himself in a way that her own anger has somehow protected her from. 2 souls in the same suit, having arrived there through completely different tragedies, experiencing the possession in completely different ways. His grief was internal. A child crushed by the machine his father built, lost between dimensions, tended by a plush toy. Her grief was external, organized outward, aimed at the man who caused it. Inside Golden Freddy, these 2 orientations coexist in the same shell without apparent resolution. Whether the crying child is still there, or whether he found his rest during the Happiest Day minigame and left Cassidy as the sole remaining occupant, is something the franchise has not definitively established. The evidence cuts in both directions. The birthday of the Happiest Day could belong to him, which would mean he is gone. and Cassidy remains alone in the suit, building her endless nightmare for Afton from a place of solitude. Or he may have stayed, unable to leave while Cassidy holds them both in place through the force of her refusal. Golden Freddy's appearance in later games as part of the Blob, the mass of animatronic material that accumulates in the post-Pizzeria Simulator timeline, raises the further question of whether either of them is still contained within a recognizable form at all, or whether the concept of containment still applies to entities that have been present this long. The suits were always provisional shelters. What they become after decades of occupation, after fire, and rebuilding and fire again, is something the franchise is still in the process of determining. The scooping room. Circus Baby will speak to you calmly about the scooping room before she takes you there. She describes it the way someone might describe a kitchen appliance, naming its function with an almost playful directness, pointing out that it sounds like something that would be used for ice cream, that it sounds like something you would want at your birthday party. She says this in the same quiet, measured voice she has been using all week to guide you through the corridors of Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. And then she takes you to the room where the scooper is and uses it. Five Nights at Freddy's. Sister Location is structured around the gradual revelation that nothing in Circus Baby's facility is what it appears to be. The hand unit, the facility's artificial assistant, describes a routine maintenance job. The animatronic's behavior is framed as technical malfunction. The voice that guides you through Night 2 presents itself as helpful, concerned, trying to protect you from dangers that the facility's cameras might observe. It is only slowly that the shape of the actual situation becomes clear, and by Night 5, when you are standing in front of the glass window of the scooping room, and the figure on the other side resolves into something that is not any individual animatronic, but all of them woven together, it is already too late. Enard is the name given to the amalgamation that forms from the combined endoskeletons of Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, and Funtime Foxy. The name itself is taken from the words endoskeleton and innards, and this is not accidental. Enard is wires and frames and eyes from 4 different animatronics arranged into a shape that moves with more purpose than any individual component should. It speaks using Baby's voice because Baby's consciousness, the soul of Elizabeth Afton inside the Circus Baby suit, is the dominant personality within the collective. Its plan, the plan it has been guiding you toward all week, is straightforward. It needs a human body to use as a disguise in order to escape the facility. The cameras are watching for anything that does not look human. Enard cannot leave as it is. You, the player character, are the solution. The scooping is the most explicitly visceral event in the franchise up to that point. The machine's purpose is described in technical terms, removing endoskeletons from animatronic suits for maintenance, and its application to the player character follows the same mechanical logic. It hollows out the protagonist, taking the internal organs and replacing them with the collective endoskeleton of Enard. The cutscene that follows shows a figure walking home in the dark and standing in front of a bathroom mirror. And when the eyes open, they are not human. They are Enard's eyes, purple and mechanical, and looking out at the world through a face that still belongs to Michael Afton. This is the point at which the 5th game makes explicit something that had been hinted at across the franchise. The protagonist of Sister Location is Michael Afton, the older son of William Afton, the boy who tormented his brother in the minigames of FNAF 4. He has been sent by his father to the facility to check on his sister Elizabeth, whose soul ended up inside Circus Baby after she was killed by the animatronic during a performance. The family reunion that Sister Location represents is not warm. Michael is scooped by his sister, or by the entity his sister is part of, and used as a biological vehicle for an escape attempt. What follows across the custom night cutscenes is grotesque in a way the franchise had not previously attempted. Michael's body, occupied by Ennard, begins to decay. His skin changes color, moving through progressively less human shades as the weeks pass. The people around him in the little 8-bit cutscenes wave cheerfully, while his silhouette becomes a darker and less recognizable shape. Eventually, Ennard is ejected, and Michael lies on the pavement, his body a purple-grey remnant of the person he was. The same purple the franchise has always associated with death and with his father. The voice that speaks over this scene says simply that he will not die. He does not die. Michael Afton survives the scooping the same way his father survived the springlock failure, through some property of remnant that the franchise has embedded into his biology, or his soul, or some combination of the two. He goes on to appear in multiple subsequent games, working night shifts at various Freddy Fazbear locations, presumably in pursuit of his father and attempting to undo what Afton has built. The scooping did not stop him. It changed him. He describes himself at one point as rotting, kept alive by some force that operates independently of the condition of his body. The detail that Ennard was ultimately controlled by Elizabeth Afton means that the act of scooping Michael was not impersonal or incidental. It was a choice made by the collective, directed by the soul of his sister. Whether Elizabeth retained enough of her original personality to recognize Michael and choose to use him anyway, or whether she had become something else entirely within the merged consciousness of Ennard, is a question the game does not answer. The baby voice that speaks to Michael throughout the week occasionally sounds almost warm. It says it will not hurt, it says only for a little while. Whether this is manipulation or something closer to resignation is something the franchise leaves in the space between what is said and what is done. What the scooping room establishes within the lore is that the bodies of people in this universe are permeable in ways that extend beyond the spiritual. The animatronics can be occupied by souls. The suits can trap the living. And the mechanism, designed for mechanical maintenance, can be repurposed for something much stranger, the transfer of consciousness across the threshold between human and machine. The remnant injected into Michael Afton by the scooper is explicitly referenced in the blueprints found in later games. It is what keeps him alive. It is what his father has been studying and pursuing across his entire history of violence. In the moment of the scooping, Michael Afton became living evidence that the thing William Afton was looking for, the key to persistence after death, was already there, inside the machine his father built for his sister. The cruelest discoveries are often the ones that were hiding in plain sight. Consider what Sister Location is structured around as a whole, and how it changes meaning once you understand who Michael is. He was sent by his father. The game implies this through William's voice line at the end, the go that implies Michael has been assigned to this task, that William dispatched his surviving son to the underground facility, where his daughter's soul is trapped inside a machine, and told him to check on things. The nature of this assignment is never made explicit. Whether William was asking Michael to observe, to retrieve something, to confirm that the Funtime animatronics were functioning as designed, is left unstated. What is established is that Michael went, and that his father sent him, and that what waited for him when he arrived was his sister's soul, sharing a collective body with 3 other animatronics that had already attempted to escape the facility multiple times. The custom night cutscenes track the week after the scooping in the form of little 8-bit street scenes. Michael, occupied by Enard, walks past neighbors who wave at him. He walks past them again when his skin has started to change color, and they wave again, reading the surface and not what is underneath it. This is a recurring dynamic in FNAF more broadly. The gap between what a surface presents and what it contains. The suits have always presented one thing while containing another. The restaurant presented celebration while containing grief. William Afton presented a friendly businessman while being a serial killer. Enard wearing Michael's body is just the most literal version of this pattern. A machine wearing a human in the same way a human once wore a machine. What happens to Enard after it leaves Michael's body is its own spiral of transformation. The animatronic collective that expelled itself into the sewer minus Circus Baby's component eventually reassembled into the entity called Molten Freddy. Baby went on to become Scrap Baby, a rebuilt version of herself that reflects the violence of her experience in the scooping room. The hive mind that was Enard fractured when Baby was ejected, and the fracture is documented in a series of online exchanges hosted on Scott Cawthon's websites in the lead-up to Pizzeria Simulator, presented as arguments within the collective before the split became permanent. Multiple animatronics sharing one continuous consciousness, arguing with themselves in real time about whether to expel the dominant personality, archived as text on a real website as though it were a customer forum. The franchise consistently makes the disturbing feel mundane. The scooping room is named for its function. The hive mind breaks up in a chat log. The machine wearing Michael's decaying body walks past cheerful neighbors. Everything horrible in FNAF is presented as ordinary. That is, consistently, the most unsettling thing about it. The virus that wears a smile. Five Nights at Freddy's, Help Wanted, frames itself as a VR experience commissioned by Fazbear Entertainment to discredit the urban legends surrounding its locations. The narrative is almost preemptive in its self-awareness. A company with a history of disappearing children and possessed animatronics hires a small independent developer to create a virtual reality game about possessed animatronics, using old circuit boards from the original locations to speed up the development process. The result was meant to repackage the horrors as entertainment, to transform the documented strangeness into a product. What happened instead is that something from those circuit boards entered the game's code and refused to stay contained. Glitchtrap is not an animatronic in the traditional sense. It has no physical form. It has no suit, no endoskeleton, no remains of anything biological anchoring it to the material world. It is data, or something that presents itself as data, while operating with the kind of intention that data is not supposed to have. It appears in the VR game as a figure that looks like Spring Bonnie, the golden rabbit suit most closely associated with William Afton, but rendered in the bright, flat colors of a cartoon character, smiling, waving, performing friendliness in a way that reads as a deliberate performance. It waves at you from around corners. It stands at the end of hallways and looks at you with a patience that suggests it is not in any hurry. It has been here before. It can wait. The cassette tapes left by a developer called Tape Girl form the only real warning system the player has access to. She found Glitchtrap while working as a playtester and understood immediately that what she was encountering was not a glitch. She describes it as an anomaly, something that attached itself to the files she recorded while testing, using her voice, repurposing her own documentation as a vehicle. She broke the recordings into fragments in an attempt to neutralize it, she tells the player not to reassemble the tapes. The instruction is given precisely because reassembling the tapes is how you progress through the game. The player does it anyway. The game is designed so that you cannot avoid doing the thing you have been warned not to do. Another tester, a man named Jeremy, never made it to the end of the project. He is heavily implied to have taken his own life after being exposed to Glitchtrap's influence. The game does not describe this in detail. It is communicated through absence, through the fact that Tape Girl is taking over his role, through the weight behind her recordings when she references what happened to him. Jeremy's story runs underneath the game the same way so much of FNAF's darkness runs underneath its surface, present in the gaps, legible only if you are looking. What Glitchtrap wants is to merge with a host, not to inhabit an animatronic, not to fuse with a mechanical suit. It wants a person. It approaches this goal with the same patience it shows in its visual appearances. It does not demand. It does not threaten, at least not initially. It builds a relationship across the course of the game, becoming more visible, more defined, more present as the player collects the tape fragments that constitute Tape Girl's warnings. By the time Glitchtrap is fully formed, the player who's been following the game's implicit instructions has essentially constructed it. The collectibles that built Glitchtrap were the collectibles the game rewarded you for finding. The identity of Glitchtrap has never been definitively confirmed by the games, but the evidence that it represents William Afton's consciousness is substantial. The Spring Bonnie appearance, the purple eyes, the phrase, "I always come back, let me out," encoded in the Princess Quest minigame within the game. The behavior of someone who is experienced at presenting a friendly exterior while pursuing something that the target would not consent to if they understood it fully. The circuit boards that brought Glitchtrap into the game were from original Fazbear Entertainment locations. Whatever was on those boards, whatever accumulated in them across years of operation in buildings where children died, found the VR environment and adapted. What distinguishes Glitchtrap from every other form Afton has taken is that it operates without any physical limitation. Springtrap could be contained in a building. Scraptrap could be burned. Burntrap could be destroyed by a physical mechanism. Glitchtrap exists in a network. It can propagate. It can copy itself into different systems across digital environments that span VR headsets and AR applications and the internal networks of mega pizzaplexes. It corrupted Vanessa, the security officer at the Pizzaplex, through prolonged exposure via the game she helped test. It transferred its influence into the Vanny mask that she wore, so that whoever wore the mask after her would be subject to the same conditioning. It operates on the principle that it only needs one person to say yes, even involuntarily, even without understanding what they are agreeing to. The most unsettling aspect of Glitchtrap in the context of the broader franchise is not what it does, but what it represents as a logical endpoint. William Afton's entire story has been one of escalating attempts to transcend the limitations of the physical body. He killed children to understand the soul. He survived death by fusing with metal. He burned and reformed and burned again. Glitchtrap is the version of him that has shed physical form entirely, that exists as pure corrupting influence, that operates through people rather than alongside them. The smile and the wave are not benign. They are the face that something terrible has learned to wear because it has had decades to study what draws people in, and it has gotten very good at being invited inside. The Vanny relationship is the most extended example of Glitchtrap's method. Vanessa was a security tester for the help-wanted VR experience, someone who interacted with the digital environment in a professional capacity and who, through that professional contact, became exposed to Glitchtrap's influence over a prolonged period. The process was gradual. The cult-like communication visible in the notes associated with her character shows someone being pulled incrementally toward a worldview and a set of behaviors she would not have arrived at through her own volition. Glitchtrap does not issue commands. It asks questions. It builds familiarity. It positions itself as something that understands the person it is approaching in a way that other people in their life do not. This method is more disturbing than a direct attack because it requires the target's participation. Vanessa was not infected against her will in the way a virus infects a body. She was cultivated. The Vanny mask that transmits Glitchtrap's influence is something she wore, something she came to through a sequence of choices that each seemed to have a reasonable internal logic at the moment they were made. The franchise does not treat her as straightforwardly villainous for this. Security Breach's true ending shows her freed from Glitchtrap's influence, suggests that the Vanessa who wore the Vanny mask was not the full Vanessa, that there was a person underneath the conditioning who was recoverable. What Glitchtrap did to her was not permanent, but what it did to Jeremy, the playtester, who did not survive contact with it, apparently was. The asymmetry between these two outcomes is one of the more understated disturbing elements in Help Wanted's narrative. Some people exposed to Glitchtrap can be brought back, others cannot. The franchise offers no clear principle for predicting which outcome applies to a given person. Jeremy and Vanessa had similar roles, similar levels of exposure, similar proximity to the source. One of them survived, one of them did not. If Glitchtrap is selective in its targeting, the criteria for selection are not visible. If its influence simply takes different people differently, the implication is that some version of everyone who encounters it is at risk, and the risk is not evenly distributed or predictable. You cannot know in advance whether you are the kind of person who survives contact with it. The Princess Quest arcade games embedded within Help Wanted function as the franchise's clearest attempt to establish a counter-narrative. The player protagonist is styled as a knight moving through a digital landscape, defeating enemies that are explicitly associated with Glitchtrap's visual language. The final Princess Quest game is the one that, when completed successfully, destroys the Glitchtrap anomaly. This framing is unusual for FNAF, which does not typically present its horror through fantasy allegory. The Princess Quest games feel like someone within the narrative trying to construct a container for something they cannot address directly, a way of encoding the fight against Glitchtrap in a form that can be played, completed, and won. Whether this encoding was sufficient, whether Princess Quest IV actually represents the final defeat of the Glitchtrap phenomenon, or merely a temporary suppression of one manifestation of it, is something Help Wanted 2's ending raises without fully resolving. The virus found another way. It seems like it always does. The night nobody talks about. The Midnight Motorist minigame is hidden inside a racing game that you buy for your fictional entertainment venue in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. To access it, you need to drive your car through the gap in the bottom boundary of the racetrack, which is not something the game tells you to do or rewards you for doing in any visible way. It is the kind of thing someone discovers by refusing to accept that the racetrack ends where it appears to end. The hidden area that opens up is rendered in a different visual style from the rest of the game. The music changes. You are driving through a rainy forest at night, and the road winds through dark trees, and there is a house. And inside the house, something is happening that the franchise has been reluctant to explain clearly. The file name for this section of the minigame in the game's code is Later That Night, the security puppet minigame, which shows William Afton killing Charlotte Emily outside the restaurant while a purple car waits nearby, is understood to take place first. Midnight Motorist's hidden section is what comes afterward. The same rain, the same purple car, now parked at a fork in the road near a bar called JR's, where the driver apparently can no longer enter because of something that happened previously. The figure you control, depicted as a yellow-orange sprite, goes home to a house in the woods and finds something wrong. A child is missing from a locked room. The room's window is broken. Outside in the wet grass, there are two sets of footprints leading away from the window, one human and one not. The driver, the yellow-orange figure, sees this and says he went to him again, and then says he'll be sorry when he gets back, and then stands there in the rain outside a broken window while the minigame offers no further information. The dominant reading of this minigame places William Afton as the figure you control, coming home the night he killed Charlotte Emily to find that his younger son, the crying child, has climbed out of his bedroom window and gone somewhere. The second set of footprints, the non-human ones, belong to an animatronic. The theory is that something from the restaurant came to the house that night, that there was some mechanism by which the crying child was connected to the Funtime animatronics or to an animatronic sent to retrieve him. Why this might have been arranged, who arranged it, and what happened when the crying child arrived wherever the footprints lead is another thread the franchise has not pulled tight. The person watching television inside the house, a grey-toned figure who barely acknowledges the driver's arrival or distress, is widely believed to be Michael Afton. His characteristic passive observation, his presence in a domestic setting while emotional catastrophe unfolds around him, is consistent with the way Michael is portrayed in the FNAF 4 minigames, where he watches his brother be tormented and does not intervene until the night everything goes wrong. The grey text colour associated with this figure in Midnight Motorist matches the text colour of Michael's older brother presence in the fourth game. The mound of dirt accessible through a second hidden path in the minigame is perhaps the detail that has generated the most speculation. It is possible to find it by driving against the trees on the western side of the road, through another invisible boundary. The mound sits there in the dark and rain, unmarked. There is nothing explicitly indicating what it contains. The theories are numerous. It is the crying child's eventual grave. It is the location of something William Afton buried after a murder. It is a marker for an entrance to the underground facility shown in sister location. It is connected to a twisted animatronic from the novel series. The franchise's official guide refers to it simply as an unmarked pile of dirt and offers no further explanation. What makes Midnight Motorist genuinely disturbing is not the hidden content itself, but the structure of the minigame as a whole. You are controlling a character who is implied to be a violent man, a killer. On the night he committed one of his earliest murders, you are navigating his mundane journey home. The car, the wet roads, the bar he cannot enter, the house in the woods, the missing child, the broken window, the footprints, the man watching television who does not react. All of it is presented without judgment, without framing, without a single moment where the game acknowledges what it is showing you. You are just driving, just going home, just standing in the rain outside a window that used to be whole. The figure watching television is perhaps the most quietly devastating detail in the entire sequence. This person, whoever they are, is in the same house, aware enough to be present, and does not engage with what is happening. They do not come to the window. They do not respond to the rain or the absence or the broken glass. They are doing the thing they were doing before, watching whatever is on, in the same posture the whole time. This kind of stillness in the presence of a family emergency reads as either profound disconnection or profound learned helplessness. Both readings are consistent with the Afton family as the franchise portrays it. The family that never speaks directly to each other. The family where the worst things are addressed through avoidance and the accumulation of unspoken knowledge. The older brother who tormented the younger one instead of protecting him. The father who built machines to capture children and kept the blueprints in his private files. The thing that broke the window and left the non-human footprints is never identified by name. The community has proposed multiple candidates, ranging from a fun-time animatronic dispatched for a purpose that fits within the facility's stated function of capturing children, to something more abstract and narrative level, a representation of the animatronic's pull on the crying child as the franchise's tragedy begins to take shape. What the footprints communicate, regardless of origin, is that the night of Charlotte Emily's murder was also the night that whatever connection existed between the crying child and the Fazbear world drew him out of his locked room in the rain. Huey went toward the thing his father built. Whether what waited for him at the other end of those footprints was dangerous, protective, or both, is something the minigame does not resolve. The design choice to embed this content inside a racing minigame, accessible only by violating the apparent rules of the game and driving off the track, has a quality that feels deliberate. The horror of this particular night is not meant to be encountered by players who are simply trying to build a profitable entertainment venue. It is meant for the ones who go looking, who notice the gap in the boundary and drive through it anyway, who understand that in FNAF, the things that matter most are frequently the things the game is not technically asking you to look at. The night the code calls later that night is the night everything started, and the only way to see what happened is to do something you were never told to do, in a game about something else entirely, in the rain, in the dark, while a figure in a yellow-orange sprite stands at a broken window and says nothing that helps. The mound of dirt in the clearing west of the main road has attracted more sustained community attention than almost any other object in the franchise's history, which is remarkable given that it is a pile of earth in a rainy field rendered in simple 8-bit graphics. The reason it draws so much attention is that it should not be there. The minigame has already communicated what it needs to communicate through the house and the footprints and the broken window. The mound is additional. It is something the game placed there knowing it would be found by the players who went far enough off-road to reach it, and it offers no explanation, no marker, no name, just the suggestion of something buried in the specific way that suggests deliberate concealment rather than natural accumulation. What the mound implies is that the house in the woods is a site of multiple events, not just one. The night of Charlotte's murder is the occasion that brings the player here, through the rack-in file name and the purple car and the security puppet connection. But the mound suggests this location has accumulated other things over time. Other events, other concealments. The Afton family home, if that is what this house is, exists in a landscape that has been used for the kind of private activity that requires remote locations and unmarked earth. The mound does not specify who is in it or what happened. It specifies that something happened that needed to not be found. This is the detail that makes Midnight Motorist not just a window into a specific night, but into a whole sustained pattern of behavior. The driver who comes home to the broken window is not encountering the aftermath of a single aberration. He is coming home to a house that already has a mound outside it. This was a household that had already been doing things that needed to be concealed in a field in the rain. The crying, child's fear of the animatronics, the nightmares that constitute FNAF 4, the older brother who tormented him. All of it was the product of living inside this dynamic, not as an observer, but as one of its youngest and least protected participants. The minigame is brief. You arrive, you go to the house, you discover what is missing, you stand at the window, and then there is nowhere else to go. The game does not let you follow the footprints. It does not open a path toward wherever the child went. You can only stand there, in the rain, in a field with a mound in it, outside a house that looks ordinary from the front and holds everything it holds behind its walls. This is consistent with how FNAF tells its worst stories, not by showing you the event, but by showing you where the event leads, and leaving you standing in the aftermath without the capacity to change it, holding what the game has let you find, and waiting for a question that will not be answered tonight. The horror of what the suits really were. Springlock suits appear briefly in the lore, mentioned in passing by Phone Guy as a historical artifact, something that Fazbear Entertainment used to make and has since retired for safety reasons. They are described as convertible, a suit that could function as either an animatronic performer or a wearable costume, depending on whether the internal mechanisms were engaged or disengaged. The hand crank that held the springs in their compressed position was the only thing separating a person wearing the suit from the mechanical components inside it. If the springs were released while the suit was occupied, the internal framework would snap back to its original position with tremendous force, impaling whatever was in its path. Phone Guy describes this process on night 4 of the original game, in the same measured, apologetic voice he uses to describe everything else about Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He mentions that the protocol for an employee who experiencing a springlock failure is to make their way to a safe location and try to hold the springs in place with their hands. He pauses in a way that suggests he is aware of how inadequate this instruction is. He mentions that there are 2 animatronics in the newer location that are springlock suits. He says to avoid any physical contact with them, particularly near their chests. This is a safety briefing. It is delivered to a new security guard by a recorded message, as though it constitutes adequate preparation. The suits that are capable of instantly killing anyone inside them are present on the premises, and the employee's orientation includes the suggestion to hold the springs with their hands. The broader implication of springlock suits within the lore is that they were produced, used, and eventually retired at a time when the people running Fazbear Entertainment understood exactly what they were capable of. William Afton was not just aware of this, he was proud of it. The early game's fandom wiki notes that he would perform in the Spring Bonnie suit at Fredbear's family diner, demonstrating his ability to use it smoothly, allegedly bragging that he could perform effortlessly while wearing it. He had internalized the danger as a kind of skill. The suit that could kill him was the suit that made him feel most alive, which, given everything else we know about him, carries a specific kind of horror. The springlock failure that killed Afton was not a malfunction or an accident in the conventional sense. He had run from the spirits of his victims into the one remaining suit available to him, and the moisture in the abandoned building did what moisture does to springlock mechanisms. The suits were retired partly for this reason. They were never entirely safe. Even in the best conditions, even properly maintained, they required a level of physical attention and vigilance that made them inherently dangerous for sustained use. The warning about rain and, Humidity in relation to spring lock suits recurs throughout the law precisely because the failure mode of these suits was always understood. Water gets into the mechanisms, the springs release. The consequences are not recoverable. What the franchise does not fully dwell on is how many people might have experienced spring lock failures who were not William Afton. Phone Guy's Night 4 call has a quality of practice delivery, as though this is not the first time this warning has been given. The protocol, he describes, the holding of the springs with the hands, the finding of a safe location, is too specific to have been developed without prior incidents. Fazbear Entertainment's approach to safety throughout the franchise is characterized by the minimum possible acknowledgement of risk, and the retirement of the spring lock suites happened only after whatever combination of incidents made their continued use untenable. What those incidents were, and how many employees or performers encountered a suit in the wrong condition, is something the law leaves as negative space. There is also the question of the crying child, whose death in 1983 involved the threadbare suit's mouth closing on his head. This is not technically a spring lock failure in the mechanical sense described by Phone Guy. It is the animatronic's jaw, controlled by its programming, responding to what was placed inside it. Michael and his friends held the crying child's head inside Fredbear's mouth as a prank, and the mechanism responded the way mechanisms respond to the weight and position of objects inside them. The distinction between a spring lock failure and this event is almost irrelevant from the outside. Both are cases of animatronic machinery interacting catastrophically with a human body in a Fazbear Entertainment location. Both are the result of proximity to machines that were never entirely safe and were operated by a company that never entirely prioritized the safety of the people around them. The suits are gone by the time of the later games, replaced first by conventional animatronics, then by the Funtime models, then by glam rock performers in the Mega Pizzaplex era. The technology progressed beyond the need for wearable mechanical suits, but the suits left behind the logic that produced them, the logic that a machine designed to entertain children could also be a machine that killed adults, and that this dual nature was something to be managed with training rather than addressed through design. That logic persists through every version of Fazbear Entertainment that follows. The suits changed. The approach never did. There is a quality to Phone Guy's Night 4 recording that becomes increasingly difficult to pass the more carefully you listen to it. He is calm. He has clearly made this recording more than once, or practiced it sufficiently that the danger he is describing no longer raises his voice. He mentions the suits and their failure mode, and then he moves on to the next item in his briefing, as though he has done his duty. The organization employing him has apparently decided that a recorded warning constitutes adequate response to the risk of employees being crushed from the inside by malfunctioning costumes. The suits are not being removed from the premises. They are not being secured in a location where employees cannot access them. They are in the building, and the building is where the employees work, and the warning is the solution. This is the institutional horror of Fazbear Entertainment before the supernatural elements are even considered. A company that produces entertainment for children has developed a costume that can kill its wearer through mechanical failure, and its risk management strategy is a phone call on Night 4. The suits represent the earliest visible version of the pattern the franchise will iterate on through every subsequent location. Something dangerous is present. The danger is acknowledged in the minimum possible terms. The operation continues. The thing that could cause harm remains where it is because removing it would cost something, either money or reputation, or the admission that a mistake was made. The children who come to the birthday parties never know any of this. Their parents, eating pizza and watching the animatronics perform, do not know it either. The suits are behind the stage, in the back area, in the room that is not on the map given to customers. The spring lock mechanism itself, understood as a piece of engineering, represents a specific and telling choice. The suits were designed to do two things: perform as animatronics and be worn by human entertainers. These two functions are fundamentally incompatible. A machine that performs autonomously needs its mechanisms engaged. A costume that is safe to wear needs its mechanisms disengaged. The hand crank that mediates between these states is an admission built into the design, an acknowledgement that the dual function requires active intervention to be safe, that the default state of the suit is dangerous to anyone inside it, and that safety requires work to maintain. This was not a design flaw, in the accidental sense. It was a design compromise made consciously, accepted because the dual function was valuable and the danger was manageable if the protocols were followed. William Afton wore the Spring Bonnie suit regularly throughout the early history of Fazbear Entertainment. He performed in it at birthday parties. He wore it while luring children into back rooms. The suit that would eventually become his death was also his most intimate instrument. There is something in this that the franchise never makes explicit, but that is present in every mention of the Spring Bonnie suit's history. He chose to wear it. He chose to maintain the springs. He worked with the hand crank and the mechanisms and the constant low-level danger of being inside something that would destroy him if the conditions changed. And he did this repeatedly, over years, while using the suit's presence as a disguise. The Springtrap suit did not become the symbol it is through coincidence. He made it that symbol by being willing to inhabit it when no one else would. The retired Springlock suits were placed in a safe room after the incidents, sealed away from the rest of the building. This safe room is where Afton hid the bodies of the missing children. It is where he eventually dismantled the original animatronics. It is where the Springlock failure that created Springtrap occurred. The room built to contain the dangerous suits became the room where the franchise's central tragedy culminated and then refused to end. The walls that were meant to contain the danger of the suits ended up containing Afton himself, preserved inside the thing they were built to sequester for 30 years. A containment strategy that worked in every way except the one that mattered most. The restaurant. That never closes. Every Freddy Fazbear's Pizza eventually closes. They close because children disappear, because adults are injured, because buildings catch fire or are condemned or become too contaminated with whatever Fazbear Entertainment leaves behind for continued use. They close. They are abandoned. They are sometimes converted into horror attractions. And eventually, the company finds a new location and starts again. The Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex in Security Breach is the largest and most elaborately produced version of this recurring structure. A multi-story entertainment complex with a hotel, a daycare, a performance stage, themed areas, and a shopping concourse, all centered on glam rock Freddy and his band. It is enormous. It is modern. It has better lighting than every previous location. And it contains, in its lowest levels, the burned remains of William Afton. The repetition is not incidental. It is the spine of the entire franchise. Fazbear Entertainment collapses and rebuilds. The animatronics are replaced, but the patterns they carry are not. The new suits reflect new aesthetics, new design philosophies, new eras of corporate branding, but the function they serve and the things they accumulate through proximity to the franchise's ongoing history remain consistent. The toy animatronics of FNAF 2 looked nothing like the original 4. They were brighter, smoother, designed with more advanced technology, and a more contemporary aesthetic. They still ended up possessed by the souls of murdered children. The Funtime animatronics were even further from the original designs, elaborate and colourful, and built for a specific kind of performance. They were built with mechanisms for capturing children inside them. The glam rock performers in Security Breach looked like rock stars. One of them was still carrying a fragment of William Afton in its deepest systems. The pattern the franchise has established across every location is that Fazbear Entertainment creates conditions for tragedy and then moves on from the tragedy without addressing it. The company's stated purpose is always family entertainment. Its actual output, in law terms, is the accumulation of grief and violence and unresolved death that has nowhere else to go. The buildings become containers for everything that happens in them and cannot be discharged through conventional means. The souls of murdered children cannot be evicted. The remnant-soaked material that concentrates in machines exposed to decades of this does not dissipate when the machines are replaced. It transfers. It waits. Henry Emily understood this. His plan at the end of Pizzeria Simulator was to bring everything into one place and burn it simultaneously, to attempt a controlled elimination of all the accumulated spiritual and material damage at once. He described it as ending where it started. His speech over the final conflagration is one of the most formally constructed pieces of writing in the franchise. The voice of a man who helped build the thing he is trying to destroy, acknowledging what it became and accepting that his role in creating it means his role in ending it must be equally total. He does not leave. He burns with it. The ending of Pizzeria Simulator was presented as a conclusion. The possessed animatronics were freed. The souls of the children found rest. Henry and Michael were presumably gone. William Afton was destroyed again. The franchise, commercially and narratively, did not accept this as an ending. Security Breach opens years later with a new Pizzaplex, a new set of animatronics, a new generation of Fazbear Entertainment products, and a building that has an Afton in its basement and a digital virus in its network. The company survived everything Henry attempted. It expanded. It became larger and more visible and more successful. What this suggests about Fazbear Entertainment as an institution is disturbing in a way that operates independently of the supernatural elements. The franchise's horror does not require ghosts or possessed suits, or a man who cannot die to be disturbing. It is disturbing as a portrait of a company that has repeatedly experienced catastrophic events involving the death or serious harm of children, that has faced investigations and closures, and that has continued to operate, to rebrand, and to market itself to families as a safe and joyful place to celebrate. The public in this universe is not ignorant of the franchise's reputation. There are phone call references to ongoing lawsuits. The police have been called. Horror attractions have been built around the legend of the haunted animatronics. And still the new locations open. Still the parties are booked. Still the advertising promises that this time it will be different. The final image the franchise keeps returning to is not the animatronics themselves, but the restaurant as a structure. The sign outside, the recognizable logo, the cheerful colors of a brand that has outlasted every tragedy it has caused. FNAF is not ultimately about haunted robots or a serial killer in a rabbit suit, though it is also very much about those things. It is about the building that keeps reopening, about the company that keeps the name and updates the product line and does not address what is in the walls, about the specific kind of horror that results when something terrible is made into a brand, when the thing people bring their children to celebrate is the same place where children died, and no one with the power to change that is sufficiently motivated to do so. The crying child was afraid of the animatronics before anyone outside his family knew there was reason to be afraid of them. He was afraid because he could feel what they carried. He had grown up in the house of the man who put it there. By the time the franchise reaches the mega pizzaplex, the building is enormous enough that people can live inside it for days without reaching every floor, and what is in its lowest levels has been there long enough to become part of the architecture. The restaurant that never closes keeps accumulating. Every party, every birthday, every night shift that ends with someone surviving until 6 in the morning adds another layer to what is already there. The animatronics smile from behind their stages. The music plays. The sign outside stays lit. And somewhere in the building, in a room most of the staff have never been to and will never be told about, something that has been here since the beginning is still waiting for the conditions that will allow it to continue. The franchise has not yet provided a final answer for what ends the pattern. Henry thought fire would do it. The fires have not been enough. Whatever accumulates in a Fazbear Entertainment location may be more durable than the buildings themselves, capable of moving into whatever structure carries the name forward. The Mega Pizzaplex replaced every prior location in scale and sophistication and resource. It brought with it everything the prior locations left behind. The next version, whatever it is, will do the same. The restaurant that never closes does not close, because what it contains has no other place to go, and the people with the power to end it have been so far outnumbered and outlasted by the thing they are trying to close. There is something specifically troubling about the way Fazbear Entertainment's advertising has always been aimed at children, not at parents, not at families in some abstract and balanced sense, but at children. The mascots are designed to appeal to children. The birthday party format places children at the center of the experience as the honored guest, the one the animatronics sing to, the one the cameras capture, laughing with their face near Freddy's stage. The marketing has always understood that if you capture the loyalty of children early enough, the association between the brand and the feeling of joy becomes structural, wired in before the child is old enough to evaluate it critically. Fazbear Entertainment did not stumble into the horror of its history. The horror grew in the soil of a business model that was very deliberately designed to make children feel safe and seen in the presence of things that were not always safe and did not always mean well. The deeper cruelty of this pattern is that it works. Children continue to love Freddy Fazbear's Pizza across every iteration of the franchise. They book parties there. They ask to go back. They carry the plush toys home. The brand generates enough genuine warmth in the children it entertains that the company's survival is ensured by the very audience it has repeatedly failed to protect. The lore of Fazbear Entertainment is not a story about a company that tricked people. It is a story about a company that provided real joy alongside real horror and relied on the joy being louder. Every child who had a wonderful birthday at Freddy's and remembers it fondly is part of the reason the restaurant that never closes never has to close. The joy is real. The horror is real. The franchise insists that both can occupy the same space at the same time, and that the horror does not negate the joy, and that the joy does not excuse the horror. These are not contradictions. They are the building's architecture. What every night guard who survived a shift at every Freddy Fazbear location has in common is that they were there because the company needed someone on the premises, not to protect anything meaningful, not to prevent the animatronics from doing what they did. The security role, as structured by every Fazbear location across the entire franchise, is essentially performative. A guard in the building means there is someone to notify if something goes wrong. It means there is a paper trail. It means the liability structure is technically fulfilled. The guards who called in the morning, having survived, are not evidence that the system worked. They are the exception that the system did not account for. The ones who did not call in are the ones the system was designed around, the ones whose presence briefly satisfied an insurance requirement and then resolved the company's problem by becoming a part of it. Somewhere in the dark, past the security cameras and the locked maintenance corridors and the sealed rooms that don't appear on any official floor plan, the mascots still stand on their stages, waiting for the doors to open, waiting for the music to start, waiting with the particular patience of things that have learned to exist beyond the normal limits of time for another birthday to begin.